Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is Ralph Jarrells.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
Time for Chris to say...
Welcome to Brooks and Brews, episode
Brooks and Brews? Brooks and Booze.
Welcome to Books and Brews.
It seems like someone's been trying the cocktails already.
Episode number...
54. With Ralph Jarrells. So, not that it's been that long since we did the last interview, but how's your month been?
Well, you know, we've been doing a lot of moving in, and life has been good in that regard. If you ask me what I've been reading lately, I will say not much. And the only thing I've been reading is actually a book on intermediate financial management.
That sounds really boring.
Real options theory for strategic innovation decision making. So, other than that, though, it's mostly about assembly instructions.
You don't want to tell the wonderful story about the escaped rabbits?
I think you should. You know, you have a much better narrative style for telling escapee rabbit stories.
Also, I didn't live through the experience, so it might be that I just find it a little funnier than you do.
I'm sure you do.
We probably mentioned last month with Dan Coonan that some of our rabbits escaped. My son had driven them down here because we moved from Duluth recently. And so he drove them all down here, and we have this wonderful kind of double-sided barn that's, they were raising dogs in one half of it, and they were raising chickens in the other half, and so we put the rabbits in the chicken run. And they were so happy, you know, it was covered over and all fenced in, and they could run around and eat grass. But we didn't think like rabbits, and it turns out there were holes in the fence. So we had New Zealand white rabbits all over the yard, and we managed to catch them, and that was good. But then Chris went out a couple days after we caught them all, and his foot slipped, and he landed in the rabbit poop.
Mouth first.
And it kind of went downhill from there, somewhat literally. Crashed into the water bottles and got a mouthful of rabbit water.
Yes, and the rabbits just laughed and laughed.
And then he told me about it, and he was upset enough that I was not as brave or as foolish as the rabbits, and I did not laugh and laugh. At least not at the moment.
Right, yes.
And I thought sometimes you do just have to laugh at life. But yeah, other than that, you know, it's been a really boring month. I think you're taking off pretty soon, aren't you, Ralph? You have a more exciting month coming up.
Yes, we leave on Wednesday for Italy.
Oh, wow.
My latest book published the 7th of this month. It's called The Essential Last Supper. And we're traveling with my son and future daughter-in-law. It's ideal traveling. I don't know why they want to travel with us old people, but they do.
Uh-huh.
And so we fly into Milan, and that's where the Last Supper painting is.
Okay.
So our first event there is going to be going to see the painting.
Okay.
And I'm going to carry a little camera and a book, and hopefully I'll have a picture of the book with the painting in the background.
Very nice.
Yeah, we're going to try for that anyway.
That would be
they
very
may not
neat.
like it, but I'm going to try anyway.
So I did want to mention, since some months I don't get a lot of reading, and last month I didn't. But this month, because we're unpacking, and we have a library of probably about 5,000 books is our best guess. And so in unpacking, I came across this called, what is that called? The Book of Speculation by Erica, what's her name? Swiler. And she and, what's his name? Andrew Davidson, who wrote The Gargoyle. I have to see if I can get each of them on this program because their books are so fantastic. So this book is about a human mermaid, if you can see the air quotes for those just listening. And it's this family where for about 4 generations, the women have been able to stay underwater for like 9, 10, 11 minutes. And so they're part of carnivals. And this is what they do. They act as human mermaids and go underwater and amaze people with how long they can stay under. But the main character is given a book, and he discovers that just as his mother drowned on July 24th, he finds out so did his grandmother, and so did his great-grandmother. And the women in his family are always drowning at very young ages on July 24th. And so now it's in the book where I am, it's July 17th, just like it's September 17th today. And he's got a week. And this is like, on the top of my mind because I've got a week till I turn older. So same dates, 24th and 17th. But it's a really interesting book, and it's exciting. This is the one benefit of an entire summer of surgery and recuperation. I'm actually getting some time to read.
And the lesson here is I need to keep her away from bodies of water on the 24th, apparently.
Apparently, so.
Yeah, I would not go in deep water on the 24th.
Right.
Well, it's July 24th, so I'm probably safe for September 24th. But we did just leave Lake Superior behind, so there's no water anywhere nearby. And
Laura, who's our guest?
I am glad you asked. Our guest is Ralph Jarrells, and I forgot to set this in huge font, so I have to put on my readers. Sometimes I try and fake it and pretend my eyes are not going. Now, I have to ask you, when you sent me the bio, you didn't say Ralph Jarrells, you said Jarrells. Do you tend to go by your last name?
No, actually, Ralph is what
Okay.
I go by. The author's name, I have my middle initial, which is Z.
Okay.
And we pronounce it as Jarrells, but
Okay.
I've gotten to the point where as long as you call me at dinner time, I don't care what you call me.
I like that philosophy.
I am totally on board with
especially
that.
If someone else cooked, which he usually does. Ralph Jarrells became an author after retirement from more than 4 decades in marketing, advertising, and publishing, much of it in senior executive positions. He writes mostly historical fiction with religious themes, and his first book was published August 4th, 2017, when he was 75, a great example that you are never too old to start a new chapter in your life. His, according to my notes, I have a typo, his Firth book, so apparently you're writing books in the Firth of Forth over in Scotland now. His 5th book, The Essential Last Supper, debuted this month, and that's what you were just talking about. So, and I do have questions about that. So, and I just wanted to mention, since now everybody knows how old you are, I don't know if you will take this as a source of pride or not, but you are nowhere near the oldest author we have interviewed. I was lucky enough to not only meet a few years ago, but to then interview last summer my favorite childhood author, and she is in her 90s now. So I think she was maybe 91 or 92 when I interviewed her. So,
When I'm 91 or 92, I'd be happy to be interviewed again.
We will look forward to it.
you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, call me up in 10 years, and I will
Okay.
interview you again.
Absolutely.
Chris, what is our first cocktail?
Well, I was very inspired by this biblical story to look up what were some of the drinking habits of people in that era. And I was intrigued to find that they did like alcohol of different kinds. They also, the drinks that they would make would have certain floral or spicy elements and herbal elements to them. So I chose a cocktail called the Goliath, reminiscent of the story of David and Goliath. And what I have here is, first of all, 2 ounces of gin, and then we mixed an ounce of lime juice with that, a half an ounce of simple syrup, a 1/4 ounce of green chartreuse, and now we're going to mix it with some ice to shake it up. And when I serve it, it's actually going to be served with 5 slices of cucumber in each of the glasses. So we're getting that kind of very nice kind of, vegetable, herbal, a kind of older infusion of a drink. So I'll bring these glasses here, pour the mixed beverage. Green chartreuse, of course, if anyone's listening who has not had it, has a very interesting character, I think. And some people really like it. Other people find it a little hard to take, but I consider it to be a very neat kind of a floral taste. And I will be putting the cucumbers on here.
So you can see, and this will be in the outtakes or on the cocktail cam, that this, it's kind of a cucumber-colored drink, and it's got cucumbers on the rim, which I happen to love. Cheers.
Cheers.
Now, I wonder, are you going to send one of those to me so I can enjoy it with you?
We will send you the recipe.
The recipe.
This is... yeah. I keep thinking we should send out the recipe ahead of time so authors can make and prepare it, and especially the last few months, I am just not that on the ball.
So what did you think of that cocktail?
I think that's interesting. It is very tart, so what part of the drink would be very tart?
The lime juice?
The lime. Okay, and I believe we have lime coming up in the third drink, too.
We do, yes. It's
yeah,
a
so
sneak
it's
preview.
a lime heavy night. So I think it's a little tarter than I would prefer, and yet surprisingly, I like it, because I typically am not going to like...
Does the cucumber
very...
help?
I'm going to put it inside, like in the drink, and I'm going to see maybe in about a little bit at the end of your reading. I'll take another sip. So Ralph is now going to read to us about the 3 kings, and this is from your book, which absolutely intrigued me, Jesus and Judas, Best Friends Forever. Go ahead.
Thank you. Joseph was awakened by a frantic knock at his room door. You have visitors, and you need to hurry. Joseph could tell from his uncle's voice that it was urgent. Joseph quickly slipped on his tunic, his sandals, and his robe, and with his uncle walked to the front door of the inn. Joseph was at a total loss for words. It was Melchior, a short, heavy man wearing an ornate jeweled crown, who first spoke. Are you Joseph, husband of Mary of Moore, mother of the new king of the Jews? Yes, was all that Joseph could be able to respond. Balthazar, a tall black man with a heavy beard, next spoke. We are travelers from various places in the Parthian Empire, and we bring gifts to the new king. Caspar, dressed in a more simple robe but with a magnificent golden crown, was next to speak. Each of us is a king. We are from different places, but we met in Jerusalem. We were asking King Herod where the new king was born. Our astronomers had each seen his star, so we are here to present gifts and pay our respects. Each of the kings were accompanied by a typical group of attendants. Melchior was accompanied by his astronomer, his chief priests, 12 mounted guards, 24 servants, 12 liverymen, and 7 storekeepers. Balthazar was also brought his astronomer and his chief priests, 10 mounted guards, 20 servants, 14 liverymen, and 10 housekeepers. Caspar had also brought his astronomer and 12 mounted guards, 20 servants, 10 liverymen, and 10 storekeepers. There were 169 people standing in front of the inn, not to mention 25 camels, as many horses, and 50 donkeys. Joseph was speechless, so his uncle took charge. Who is the leader of each entourage? The lead guards each steps forward. Take everyone and the animals to the back of the inn. There will be plenty of water there. Gentlemen, if you and your essential servant will join me on the roof, Joseph will get Mary and Moore and the baby, and there were cushions enough to seat all of the kings. Joseph went back to the room to get Mary and Moore and the baby. They joined us royalty on the roof. Mary Moore was glowing when she walked on the roof carrying the baby. Casper was the first to speak. As soon as Mary and Moore, the baby was settled. I am Casper, he said. I am king of the Principality of Armenia, one of the kingdoms of the Parthian Empire. I am here to celebrate the new king of the Jews. My astronomer reported the star a month ago. My chief priest said he was born in the city of David. So we went to Jerusalem, the city of David. King Herod knew nothing of the new king, but he suggested that Bethlehem was where King David was born. I bring the new king a jar of the finest frankincense, a perfume used by the kings in my country. I'm Belteshazzar, ruler of the king of Nubia. I am here to celebrate the birth of the king of the Jews. In my kingdom, myrrh is highly valued. It is a sweet perfume and is essential at the time of death. My astronomers reported the star. My chief priest knew of an old reference that a new king would be born in the city of David in Jerusalem. Casper and Melchior met me, so we came together to Bethlehem. I'm King Melchior of Persia. All of our kingdoms are in the Parthian Empire. I bring the new king a chest of gold. Our wish is to be told that he be told of our visit, so we can prosper together. Great leaders of great people need to lead together. We celebrate his birth. Each of the kings held and kissed the baby. Belteshazzar recounted their visit to King Herod and his demand that they return to Jerusalem to tell him of the young king and where he was. As we traveled here, an angelic being appeared to me and warned us not to return to Jerusalem. The vision told us to return to our kingdoms and not meet with King Herod. I fear King Herod will want to harm the baby.
My first reaction to this reading fit exactly what you said on your website, that we're so used to these stories, we sometimes don't really think about them. And in reading this, it really hit me. Of course, three kings didn't just jump on camels and just the three of them wander across the desert. Of course, they came with their entourages. And it really put, a story that I've known my whole life. We set up our manger scene every Christmas. It put it in a new light, along with you really brought out that they had no clue who Jesus was. They thought he was an earthly king. So tell me a little about your research for this book. How do you research more than 2,000 years back in time? What sources do you use?
Well, first of all, the concept of Jesus and Judas knowing each other before the discipleship is one that I had questioned throughout my youth in Southern Baptist Church we attended. I knew that Judas had to be more important to Jesus than just to have one of the disciples because he kept the money. So how do I research? I first of all, the concept that Jesus was a practicing Jew and in many situations considered a rabbi. So he would be practicing all of the Jewish traditions. But he had to have met, I have the books, there are 12 books on the history of Jews, and I have used those, if you'll excuse the pun, religiously in the research. But there's that. We also know that the Roman Empire was a controlling government of that era. So I looked into history. The only written history that mentions Jesus is one Jewish historian, and it is Josephus, the only historian who mentions Jesus. So I have all of his writing. I went ahead and got books that were translated of his writing. So that's where all the research came. The idea of the story and building of the story of friendship. We know that Jesus, from the Bible, we know that he was born. We know that he went to Egypt. We know that at age 12 he was accepted into the community of the church, of the synagogue. And then we know at age 30 or thereabouts he started his ministry. So in the research I found that Alexandria, Egypt, has the largest Jewish population. So it seemed to me logical that he would have gone, that Joseph, a good carpenter, would have gone to Alexandria to have the baby and his wife there. He would have immediately joined in with the local synagogue and would have found that one of the best people to be associated with was the best carpenter in Alexandria. So that all built itself into the idea of that's where Jesus and Judas would have met. Okay. So as children, they grew up together.
So you think that Judas lived in Alexandria, Egypt?
It makes sense, even though, or made sense because his father would have had a business there.
Okay.
And the other parts goes, the rest of it goes forward. That his uncle, Judas's mother's brother, actually sat on the Sanhedrin.
Okay.
So the concept of Judas betrayed Christ for the money seems to have always been a question in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
If he was wealthy, first of all, 30 pieces of silver is not a lot of money.
Wait, what was it then? Like the equivalent of today's money, what did he betray Jesus for?
I'm told it's about $28.
Is that all in today's money?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's sort of why putting it together the way I did. But I also was able to bring Philo, the number one Jewish teacher in the city of Alexandria. So I have the two of them being students of Philo and growing up together, and that's the first part of the book. Then they are accepted into the congregation in Jerusalem together, and then they separate. Judas comes back to Alexandria, and Jesus goes to Nazareth. So, but the research itself, you'll never find the story the way I wrote it anywhere in the research. Mm-hmm. But the concepts are built in there, and the story, not a large part of it's built to be interesting. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so but that's the way it all.
So I have a question. You talked about Josephus, and when people get into the arguments about the validity of Christianity, one thing that's brought up is that we do have historical evidence that Jesus, as a historical figure, existed. Whether you believe he's God or not, there is evidence of his historical existence. And I believe Josephus is one of the ones who recounts the trial. Yeah. Is Judas ever mentioned in any of these historical writings outside of the Bible?
There are, yes, but not in canonical histories. There are a number of the apocryphal books that reference Judas. In fact, there's even one gospel according to Judas in the apocrypha. Now, it's easy for traditional church people to say, well, that's not the truth because it's not in the Bible.
Mm-hmm, right.
And then, what I'm about to say, I think is probably heresy. But, the Bible, the King James Version of the Bible, which is what I use as the religious basis of the story, was put together by a group of Roman Catholic cardinals at the Council of Trent and the Council of Nicaea. And that was at King James that Charlemagne, I guess, at his insistence.
Okay.
But, it's. I have to say, I've lost a couple of family members as friends.
Really?
Because of it.
That's a shame.
And, that's life.
Mm-hmm. We were just talking to a couple today, and I won't say which religion they joined or left, but similar thing where they didn't exactly lose family, but his father will not acknowledge to anybody in their church that he has left that church. And, certainly I know of other people who happens in faith, it happens in politics, it's a shame. But
well, and I don't know if you have any more about Jesus Judas than the segment I sent you, but I put a statement of belief as part of the beginning of the book. So if anyone questions why I did this or what I believe or any question about it, what I believe is part of the book.
Right.
But not necessarily part of the stories. It's religious fiction.
Right. But I think we do the best we can. I mean, going back 2,000 years, my books are set in 1314 to 1390. It's hard enough researching that far back, and sometimes you have to fill in some blanks with your best guesses, but I think it's worth getting people to think. And they can make their own decisions and say, I don't believe this, and maybe it leads somebody to do their own research and dig deeper, and that changes lives.
And that concept is why I wrote the latest book, The Essential Last Supper, is whenever that's said, whenever someone says the Last Supper, the image that comes to mind is Da Vinci's painting.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, it's all wrong.
And it's like you were looking over my shoulder reading my notes of my questions. Because that was my next question. What did he get wrong? I'm dying to know. I don't know a whole lot about Da Vinci's, versus...
First of all, no one was sitting. At that time, the time of the Last Supper, the actual Last Supper, again, you have to assume, have to consider Jesus was a practicing Jew. So the Last Supper was most likely the Seder meal.
Well, and it was at Passover, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So the Roman tradition of that time was for a table to be essentially an open square, three-sided table. So the fact that the entire group is at a long table is just not practical and not historically correct. We actually found, and it's corroborated by the Gospels, that they were at a triclinium, which is what the three-sided table is called. We also can find where Jesus, John, Judas, and Peter sat at the triclinium table based on Roman custom and based on quotes out of Matthew. So the custom was for the host of the dinner to sit in the second seat on the left-hand arm of the three-sided table. So that puts Jesus in seat number 2. Seat number 1 would be for a young, honored guest. And we know that would be John, first of all, because they called him, Jesus is with reference to John as being it. We know it because John leaned into Jesus' bosom to ask who the betrayer was. Now, if you consider that they are reclining at this three-sided table on their left side, eating with their right hand, the only place John could have been would have been on Jesus' left hand. So that puts John's seat 1, Jesus' seat 2, and Judas' seat 3, because it said that he who sops in the same cup as me is the one that will betray me.
I'm fascinated that nobody has ever dug into this before, because if it's easy enough to research and find these customs, why didn't anyone?
Because I'm smart, I guess. And so, and excuse me for being facetious, but
that's what makes it fun.
The fun fact of it is that Peter sat in what was considered the servant's seat. He reclined in the servant's position. And we know that because the servant's position was in the last seat on the right side of the triclinium. And the gospel says that Peter sat across from John. So the only place he could have sat would be in the last seat on the right side of the table. And again, that's the seat of the servant. To me, that is Jesus still teaching his disciples at the Last Supper, because he has said that he who wants to be biggest should be least.
The first will become last, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you should be last, or the servant. And so he put Peter, who wanted to be on his right hand when they got to heaven, put Peter in the seat where he is the one that's supposed to have washed everybody's feet.
That is absolutely fascinating, and I would love even just to read through your research books. I would almost more like to read your research notes than the book itself after talking to you. We do have to move on to cocktail number 2. And so we are completely switching from biblical times to 1800s, I think. 1699 to 1725 or so. Oh, this is way earlier than I thought. But just to put in a plug for a previous guest here, my friend Oscar Shaheen was on the program probably about 3.5 years ago. He was one of the earlier guests of the podcast. And his books are all about, I hate to say Pirates of the Caribbean, because, people think of the movie. But his books are really, really neat. And if you like pirate stories, I believe you are only the second author that we've had on who writes about pirates. So, yeah, I'll have to get a few more.
I don't want to keep you from drinking.
Well, I sincerely appreciate that. So what we have, looking at South Carolina and the Low Country and the almost tropical humidity and heat, when I've ever visited South Carolina, it's about a couple of things. Some very good, easy to drink drinks, sweet tea, and, just good culture, good conversation, good experiences. So I had to go to a very straightforward South Carolinian drink, which is sweet tea and vodka. And so here we have basically about 4 ounces of sweet tea to a jiggerful of vodka, which I'll just shake up here, and very simply and easily serve over ice. And I know we're talking that we're in the 17th century, and so, we're not necessarily, perhaps in the Gullah Gullah time frame or, in the traditional Low Country, but to me, as I was reading that story of Anne and her grandmother, this just called out to me as the drink that should be sipped while, reading a story like that.
So, cheers, sweet tea and vodka. I can't even taste the vodka in that.
Which is important, I think, for a very good drink.
And for young men at frat parties. So, I have to say, first of all, to me, now I grew up in the Air Force, so I've kind of lived all around, but, my parents' families have been in the Midwest since they got to this country in the 1800s. So, I'm not really a product of the South, and I didn't really think of Tennessee as the South, but apparently it is the South and the Deep South. So here we have, I discovered sweet tea. I'd always heard about sweet tea. Up in the North, we don't have it, and so I imagine it as being like kind of iced tea, but with like that much sugar mixed into it, like you would just choke. I didn't think I would like it, but when we got here, I got sick of drinking water, and I was just in bed all day recuperating. And Chris brought me iced tea, and I have been drinking this stuff by the gallon. I swear, there are times I go through an entire jug in a day, and it's like, Chris, I'm out of
Anyway, it's time to go get more. I have to say, when I've been to South Carolina, I worked with, with some companies in Columbia and other spots that are not far from the Lowcountry, that some of that sweet tea actually was the consistency of like maple syrup. There was so much sugar in it, but it just depends upon where you go.
Milo's that you had is from Alabama.
Okay.
Actually. And sweet tea is always the joke of the South, because that really is sort of the standard drink.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go anywhere in the country and ask for iced tea or sweet iced tea, they many times have no idea what you're talking about. So
we wouldn't have in Duluth. I mean, I'd heard of sweet tea, but really only because, like I interview authors from all over the country and I do a lot of reading. But even I would have been like, what is that tea with like 5,000 cups of sugar in it?
Right,
I don't know.
In the North, of course, if you ask for sweet tea, they'd look at you disapprovingly because you would want sugar in your drink. And then second of all, they would feed you or give you a very inadequately brewed cup of tea, and you'd be, it's nothing like you get down south, is what I very, very much have seen.
They give you a cup of hot tea and a glass of ice.
Right.
If you mix it that way, it's not very good at all.
Right, yeah, it's
well,
terrible.
I'm a total con. So we are ready for reading number 2. We're jumping back to late 1600s, early 1700s, correct?
Right.
Go ahead.
I thought Chris would probably come up with a nice grog recipe since it was a pirate, but the question if grog and good exist in the same sentence, so I understand that.
Well, he may surprise you still.
in reading number 3.
Not to foreshadow.
So this is chapter 1. The early evening air that encased Goose Creek Plantation was infused with the intoxicating perfume of gardenia blossoms. Like most late spring, summer, and early autumn days, the coastal South Carolina humidity spread a moist veil like a shroud over literally everything, living and dead. This is especially true of the areas surrounded by the marsh. As a resident of Charlestown, you expected the all-pervasive shroud and the perfumes that permeated it. Some of them not nearly so pleasant as the aroma of gardenias. On the front porch, called piazza by some, veranda by others, those Charlestown folks didn't have colorful ways about them. Anne Cormack sits with her granddaughter. On the eve of her 18th birthday, granddaughter Annie was seated legs askew on the front porch swinging across from her grandmother, for whom she was named. She was in her favorite rocking chair, slowly swinging, slowly rocking together. They watched the effortless transition from evening into night. The young girl's frock lay as undignified a manner as her legs. The young woman was caught in an awkward time between girlhood and womanhood. She was there with her grandmother, she was comfortable, and that was all that mattered. The older woman glanced over at the swing and to admire the beautiful young woman her granddaughter had become, and noticed the unladylike position assumed by the teenager. The casual way she was sitting with her knees apart and her chemise bunched up near her waist left her private parts open to view for anyone that was on the porch. Annie girl, look after your frock. I'm sitting here looking right at your treasures. Being ladylike was as much a part of the complex lady as Dorothy, whose singing wafted up from the slave quarters. Her low-country Carolina accent and the flowery selection of descriptors from her Irish heritage added spice and texture to the grand background of Goose Creek Plantation, as did her insistence on dressing for dinner even when she was the only one dining. Granny Ann, the girl's frustration was evident in the inflection of her voice. It's just you and me here. I know you're not looking, so what difference does it make? Annie dear, being a lady, a Cormac lady, is extremely important in this day and time. Throughout your life, I've taught you what I've learned the hard way. Being a lady means more than looking your best all the time. It's how you think. It's being aware of yourself and your surroundings. It's even when you don't think anyone's watching. It's taking advantage of, not being taken advantage of. How do you think I've succeeded as I have? So remember, watch yourself and watch out for yourself. And pull your dress down right now.
That's, I got a kick out of a pirate telling someone to be ladylike. Is it ladylike to be, swashbuckling on other ships and killing people? In my mind, no, but
Details.
That's just me.
Yeah.
That's the juxtaposition of what she did and what she was doing. Her father had bought the plantation when she was young. He was part of the problem that she had as a child. She was, as the title of the book says, fiery red hair, emerald green eyes, and a vicious Irish temper. Mm-hmm. She was a young woman that had a bad temper, but also, her mother died when she was young, and she didn't understand that, and so she was rebelling against everyone. Mm-hmm. But once she had finished her pirating career, thanks to being put in prison in Jamaica, she was brought, although there's no historical evidence of this, it is a common belief that her father, who was wealthy, bought her freedom from the governor of Jamaica when she was in prison.
What age was she when she was in prison, do you know?
Approximately 18.
Oh, that young. Okay.
Yeah. She started pirating when she was 16.
Oh my, I missed my opportunity. There I was practicing trombone.
That'll learn you.
And the funny part of all of this is that the idea of the story was planted by the mother of one of my best friends. One evening when we were had cooked steaks out, and we were sitting in front of a nice fire in a wintry evening with a little bit of Bushmills, and I was telling them the story of my first novel, and I have to admit that
okay, so your first novel is Jesus? You're talking about a novel about Jesus, and that reminds them of a pirate?
My first novel was Ill-Gotten Gain.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that was the first. But still, that's...
the story of the 30 pieces of silver
right.
Judas was given, and how they got to Charleston. So we were talking about Charleston, and I was regaling the group about my new novel that I've been working on. I found that it was far more interesting at that time to talk about writing the novel than it was to actually write it and see if I could get it published. More storytelling than not. So anyway, we're sitting there talking about the Ill-Gotten Gain, and his mother, fine Englishwoman. His father had been assigned by the Royal Navy to the Navy Yard in Charleston. Got finished talking about Ill-Gotten Gain. She said, "Why don't you write a novel about Aunt Bonnie?" And I said, "Who?" Now, I grew up in Columbia. At that time, I was working for the...
I just want to clarify the city, not the country, correct?
Correct.
For anyone listening.
South Carolina thing.
Okay.
And so I said, "I've never heard of her." And she said, "Well, she was from Charleston. She was the first female pirate in the Caribbean." Well, all right, I'll look into it. So I finished, fast forward a little bit, married a wonderful lady who said, why don't you finish writing your book? So, okay. And so I did. I'd always heard all these horror stories about publishers, and you send them a copy of your manuscript, and, 6 months later they send you a form letter saying we're not interested. Well, I really never expected to go forward with it. But I got the story finished, and the first publisher I submitted it to actually published it.
Wow.
So,
congratulations.
that was good. But when I asked him, I said, now that I've finished this first novel, what do you want me to do? And so he said, write another.
Good advice.
So, okay. So the second one was the Anthony book. And it was fun researching. I enjoy the researching part of writing.
Very nice.
We need to go on to cocktail number 3. And just for all our, oh my gosh, there's an absolutely incredible rainbow out there.
Oh, wow, there is.
It's a double rainbow, in fact. That's amazing. But, so, cocktail number 3.
Well, you actually introduced it as we were bringing in cocktail number 2. I had to make a rum and grog for today, starting off with an ounce of lime juice, an ounce of brown sugar to give it a little bit of sweetness, some dark rum, and water, of course, to be reminiscent of the watered down rum. So I have that here in a shaker. And then I'll just pour it over some ice. And we will have our rum and grog for the third reading.
So, cheers. This is reminiscent of what the pirates might have been drinking on board, maybe a slightly updated version.
Mm-hmm.
With brown sugar.
They would have been drinking on board. Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh my gosh, sign me up to be a pirate if I get this every day.
Or a British sailor.
I don't care. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
This is good. Of course, I'm a huge fan of brown sugar, so.
Yeah.
Reading number 3.
To set the stage for this reading, Anne, dressed as a boy, she and James Bonney are on a ship going from Charlestown to Nassau. It was a difficult 8-day trip from Charlestown to New Providence. We hit rough seas almost as soon as we left the Charlestown harbor. And I was sick for the first 5 days of the sailing. All I could keep down was rum and grog and an occasional biscuit I had taken from the plantation. On the first clear day, James and I were on deck. A gnarly, bearded, excuse-for a man stumbled over to where we were standing, and he spilled his rum on me and said, "This your first shipping? Only a little girl would be sick in waters like this." I looked at James, and he started to apologize for me. I pushed James aside, slapped the bully as hard on the face as I could, and I told him I would see him at sunset right where we were standing, and he should bring his sword because he would be fighting for his life. I turned, headed back to the store where I had stored my weapons. James was still apologizing for me and took a fist on the chin for not leaving when I did. As I unwrapped the swords, James said that I had challenged the second in command and he was an expert swordsman. I told James that he needed to grow some nutmegs and not to worry about me. The sun was on the horizon when I arrived where we had had our confrontation. He showed up carrying a large cutlass. I had my rapier. He cleared some space. Every one of the pirates on the sloop gathered around us. He announced that he was going to make shark meat of this impudent little girl of a man and laughed loudly. He looked at me and said, "It's just like a little girl to bring a dagger to a sword fight." Then he snarled. I'm sure he thought this would be easy work. There was a lot of betting going on. I guess I made some of them a lot of money on that evening. In the fencing lessons from my father, I had learned to allow the opponent to have the first few moves so that you could evaluate his strengths and his weaknesses. I simply dodged his first lunge. That made him laugh. More money was bet. He took a wide swing which I also dodged. More laughter. He was growling his challenge. "Are you ready to feel the edge of my cutlass, you little girl coward?" He didn't know I was a little girl. To him, that was the ultimate insult. It was that moment that I decided I would take his ego before I took his life. With that, he started a charge. I simply sidestepped his advance and slapped him soundly on the butt with my rapier. He was shocked by the move. The assembled pirates started laughing at him. He made the same move again and again received the slap on the butt for his effort. Again, I sidestepped the thrust, but this time I planted my rapier in his side. I quickly withdrew it to be ready for another move, but I heard the sound of air escaping from the wound. I had pierced his lungs, and I knew that he would not stand to fight again. He jerked a couple of times, crumpled to the deck, and was still and dead. The captain of the sloop walked over to the center of the circle, announced that the exhibition was over. He directed his crew to strip the corpse of his valuables and clothes and throw the body overboard. He became his prediction. He was the shark meat. Captain came to me and suggested I should take the place of the offending pirate as his second in command. I declined, but said loudly, for all assembled to hear, that if anyone gave me any trouble, the sharks in the Gulf of Florida would enjoy some more pirate meat.
I have a question about this scene. Is this scene historical?
No.
The reason I ask, usually a strong woman against a strong man, the man is going to win. And that's why I was curious about this scene. I mean, I've seen my son in wrestling pin a girl in about 12 seconds flat. And that's when he's not even trying. So that's why I was curious if this was a historic scene. But even if it's not, the fact is she was successful as a pirate. How did she do that competing physically against men who were in general going to be stronger than her?
Well, my evaluation of that is that she was a lot stronger than you would expect.
Okay.
I think she was also unusually large for a woman of that era.
Okay, how tall or big was she?
I don't know. There's no evidence to that, so I can't answer. But in the book, the setup for this is that her father was an expert fencer and had spent lots of time teaching her to fence. And then when she met James Bonney and thought he was captain, he told her to take the weapons and practice and become good with them. And so one of the things is that there was no tree on the plantation that didn't feel her sharp sword. So I think that what I would like to have left with that is skill many times is more important than strength.
And that's part of why I believe this scene. And in fact, that question literally did not even occur to me until right now as you were reading it, even though I've read the scene several times over the last couple days preparing for this, because I do believe the scene because I was briefly in fencing and clay fencing, things like that. That's a field where intelligence and quickness, agility can outplay brute strength. So that's why I didn't doubt that scene. But it just occurred to me as I was listening now, you know, whether it was actually historical.
Tell that to
I'm
James
disappointed
Douglas.
It's not.
I would not be surprised if it didn't happen.
Okay. I was curious, in all your research, did you find anything about pirates that really surprised you?
Yes, there was a honor among pirates that you wouldn't think would have been there. In fact, they took an oath when they boarded a ship, and that oath was to take care of their fellow pirates. That was somewhat of a surprise. I don't know, the whole concept of camaraderie on the ship makes a lot of sense, because if they weren't taking care of each other, then they usually, when they went into battle, in most cases, they were outnumbered by the crew of the other ship. So I guess that whole concept was surprising because I'd never thought about it.
Now, I'm curious. To me, in a way, I immediately say, and yet going back to another of our guests, was it, I can't remember the son's name, with Frank Tahovsky, was that the father of the son, who he and his co-author Cynthia Crock wrote 40 Thieves of Saipan about Marines in World War II. And in the military, and say among law enforcement, there is going to be that strong sense of honor of protecting each other. And yet, my mind immediately says, but they're in the right. So did these pirates think that they were in the right, or was it just, we're in this together and we're going to take care of each other?
To be honest, I don't know that I even have an opinion about that.
Okay.
I certainly didn't find it in any of the research. I enjoy with writing challenging me in what I write. I've often said that this is written as an autobiography.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I have very little experience in being an 18-year-old girl and no experience in being a 55-year-old woman. So writing it and having it be, amazingly enough, I've had women who are grandmothers say that they relate so well to the story because of the relationship between the grandmother and granddaughter.
That's a high compliment.
It really is. But I think in writing we dig into human nature because in the past when I was deep into writing, I've said I've never been a medieval Scottish warrior, and yet I could dig into, as I delved into the research of the time of our modern trombonist, what now trombones, what now? Our modern trombonist is like, you're going to do what to those poor English horses? And the Scottish warrior says, and if I don't, do you know what they're going to do to my wife and my children? And I actually found it very easy to get into that mindset, and ironically, sometimes easier than writing characters who are closer to who I really am.
I've been told that when you're writing and you're really into the writing part of it, your character takes on a personality of their own.
I absolutely believe that, because at the time I was writing my novels, and as I said, they're set in 1314 to 19 Scotland, a very bloody, brutal time fighting against the English. I was also teaching music lessons, and so I'd have a half hour where a student didn't show up. I'd be deep in writing, brutal battles, and a 7-year-old shows up for piano lessons, and it was this weird mind split where literally half of me is a medieval warrior killing people, and the other half of me is, this placid, pleasant piano teacher working with children. It was literally like both people inhabited my mind. It was a weird feeling, which I think only other authors and psychopaths can appreciate.
I can relate to at least one of those anyway.
Right.
And so that's what started the whole concept.
And it's a fascinating concept. It's interesting. We just had this discussion about another couple, and she was saying for her, this faith just came very naturally, whereas I'm more like you. I question, okay, what is it I'm supposed to believe? Why am I supposed to believe that? And I did get myself in some trouble with that, where it's like, you're telling me to get confirmed? Well, you didn't tell me what I'm agreeing to. And I'm not agreeing to it until I know what I'm agreeing to, which seems to me very logical even now today. But even at 16, I'm like, you got to tell me what I'm agreeing to. I don't sign contracts without knowing what they're about. And that was not well received. But, I did my own looking, I did my own asking, and I think there's something beautiful about faith that doesn't need that, but I think we also need the people who ask the questions. I think we need both types.
Well, interestingly, with Jesus Judas, I've had 3 ordained ministers who were also PhDs review Jesus Judas, and they all had high praise for it and high praise for the research, and I appreciate that. But the other part of the book that we didn't discuss is I did take the time to harmonize the 4 Gospels as it relates to Jesus' ministry. And that's a part of the book that we didn't talk about, is using the stories of the 4 Gospels, and they are different, and putting them together on a timeline that makes sense. When Jesus traveled from here to here, it was talked about in one Gospel, but not in the other 3. This or that. And again, that's part of the natural questioning that I would go through when writing.
Right. And you have a website on this. Where can people find you online?
Nowhere that they can catch up with me, gosh.
A deliberately hidden website, very unusual in this day and
Excellent
age.
marketing strategy.
Yes.
Well, RalphieJarrellsAuthor.com is...
I would like to
my writer.
specify that is Ralph E. The letter E, Jarrells, not Ralphie as in, P-H-Y.
No,
Not like in a Christmas story.
I was out in a Christmas story. That is my middle initial.
And I can tell our 8.3
Million.
2 million, because you just gained us a few more. Everyone counts.
I would expect every one of them to buy a book.
At least.
Okay, at least
one,
half of them.
10 for family members.
Right.
All of the books are available on Amazon.
Okay, and Michael is at aperfectpint.net. Michael and I are at booksandbrews.net. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/Books and Brews with Laura Vosika and Michael Agnew.
Gotta breathe in.
Right.
But where are you at?
I'm at lauravosika.com, V as in Victor, O-S-I-K-A. Oh, Michael and I have a YouTube channel, which everybody should check out. I believe it's like the @ Books and Brews, something like that.
The one thing we're missing is what's coming next month.
Coming next month, Peggy Williams has been a freelance writer, worked on corporate and educational video scripts. She runs a blog called Musings of a Mad City Writer. That's because she's in Madison, Wisconsin. Get it? Mad City, Madison. And has co-written several books in her On the Road mystery series. She has recently signed with a small press to publish her first historical novel, Courting the Sun, which is set in 17th century France. So I am looking forward to talking to Peggy. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you about your books.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you all. I look forward to the recipes.
Cheers.